But for the purpose of this particular presentation, I think some of us might have seen it in a different workshop, but it will go into a bit more significant detail in this one. And yeah, I think we're having a conversation with Casey, and she said, when we have numbers, we have something to speak about. Yeah, and here we are going to talk about the hardcore sort of numbers. So this conversation is a follow-up to a presentation that I made last year at this exact same forum, where I presented the Housing Development Cost Benchmark Report. And the report basically said, the report was looking at 3 typologies of houses, and these were hypothetical houses. Those are 55 square meter house, bungalow, and then 2 low-rise and high-rise apartment blocks. And the output of that particular process was that the average cost of development, so all the costs along the housing value chain, ranged between 74,000 shillings per square meter all the way to 68,000 shillings per square meter. So those were the all-in costs that we came up with. And of course, the majority of those were construction costs. So 46,000 shillings, 56, and 57,000 shillings was what we sort of landed at. And post presenting this, of course, there were many questions that came up. And again, the caveat was these are 2022 prices, so 2 years ago. But then we sought to extend this study using actual project data, so that when we're having the conversation, we'll be having the more tangible data as opposed to hypothetical. But before we get into that, I think I wanted to first take us through the general macro environment of costs. I won't need to belabor this. I think it is clear that over the last 2 or 3 years, costs have been increasing across the entire economy. We've been going through a sort of rough patch. And the graph on the extreme left hand of the screen is the construction inputs, CIPI. It's the construction input price index that's done by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. So 2019 is a base year, which was 100, and then as of 2023, the prices have gone up by about 20% from the CIPI index. So generally in line with what we are seeing in the market. And then what KNBS does is it disaggregates that construction input price index into these 4 different line graphs. So we have materials, we have equipment, transport, and labor. And from that particular graph, I think the one that has had the highest increase is the purple line, and that's transportation, that has had the highest increase in the index, which stands to reason. If we look at pump prices in Kenya, they have increased significantly, and those have, latent impacts in terms of being able to transport materials to site. Even in the manufacturing value chain, it is like it stands to reason that that's going to happen. And then materials have also been increasing, of course, as a factor of transport and other material and other factors. Now, what is interesting to note is the green line, which is the cost of labor. And it hasn't increased at the same rate as the other inputs. It is good for developers when the cost of labor doesn't increase, but when you look at labor as an income metric, because remember, it's a cost on our end, but it's an income on the household end, it means then affordability has also not improved over the same period of time. That it has become significantly more difficult for individuals to just afford anything because their incomes have not grown at the same rate as inputs, or the cost of inputs have grown. And I think it's telling, with all the strikes that are going on, that it is a real and present factor of production, that incomes just aren't growing as fast as other factors of production. And that then stands to question, affordability altogether. So in terms of methodology, how did we go about the construction cost analysis? It is predicated on the principles of open access, where we usually request private developers to share with us information regarding their projects, and then we are able to analyze it and produce knowledge products like this. So we did request one of the developers participating in open access to share with us their architectural designs, their structural designs for a project, and their bills of quantities. Then we got a quantity surveyor to be able to carry out this analysis. And if anybody has ever looked at our bills of quantities, it is usually a black box of information. You just have the rates, the quantities, and the totals, yeah? So it's difficult to be able to disaggregate what portion is labor, what portion is contractor profit, what portion is materials. And that's what this process was about, being able to disaggregate those different factors from the bills of quantities. Now, this is one approach that we've used. We are going through a similar process with an investor called LIF, the Livelihood Impact Fund, where they're interested in funding a social housing project, but for them, we are conceptualizing the construction cost analysis from design all the way to construction. And we are also carrying out a pilot with them where we are building as we are recording costs so that we can be able to ascertain what the cost of that particular project is. But for this particular approach, we used the information that we could get. Now getting into the project itself, this particular project has about 300 units, ranging from bed seats to 2-bedroom units. In terms of the selling prices of the units, it's between 2.2 million to 6 million shillings. And the total gross lettable area for the project is about 12,000 or 13,000 square meters. Now, these are just interesting statistics. I think for anybody who is not involved in housing, it's usually good to just see the extent of the project. It's on ground plus 7 with ground parking with no basements. So the project, according to the analysis, is going to consume about 647 tons of steel. And I know maybe for the KGBS team, it's just the amount of embodied carbon in the project is ridiculous. But yeah, 6,120 cubic meters of concrete. We have tiling. I mean, it's a massive project undertaking. And just from the get-go, what we found as the cost that the project is incurring per square meter is about 48,971 on a gross lettable area basis. Accounting for efficiency, that comes to about 57,612 shillings per square meter of gross built-up area. So about 60,000 shillings per square meter of construction costs per square meter on GBA. It's significantly higher from what we had shown under the development cost benchmark, but that is the reality of what our developer is actually facing, and the project is actually still under construction. So this could change post them finishing construction. So the next slide is now a disaggregation of the BQ. I hope the texts are legible. So this is what might have been seen at the KGBS workshop. But for the rest of us, I think what's important for us to note is that we were able to then disaggregate what the different cost apportionments were from cost of materials. And then we're able to lump the cost of labor, transport, and profit. So there was a limitation in our analysis because BQs often obscure what the contractor profit is, and we were not able to disaggregate what that was from labor, transport, and we lumped it up as one. But suffice it to say, material costs are the highest portion of it. So if you relate this with the construction input price index, if the cost of materials has been increasing, then it has a significant impact on that. And then also transport, we saw it increasing quite significantly. So it stands to reason that they would affect this. And then now under the cost of materials, we went further and analyzed where does that fall within the elemental breakdown of the building. So is it in the shell and core? Is it in the provisional sums or the finishes aspect? So we were able to do that. But the point of this analysis for us is not really the numbers that you're seeing here. For us, we want to be able to build a repository of data using 100, 200 projects, which would then allow those of us in this room to be able to interact with this data in a much more digestible fashion, so that if you have queries regarding the cost of your own project, you will have a repository of information that you can be able to compare your project against. And that's what we want to build out, not just for one project, but for a myriad of different projects. And then in so doing, build out an actual construction index using real project data. So this is just the first of the journey that we are on in terms of building out that information. And then a different way of looking at it, we wanted to also see what the elemental breakdown is in terms of the different works. So from the shell and core, provisional sums, furniture and fittings, and then now we came and broke that down into further smaller pieces. So of course, in the shell and core, the substructure and superstructure is one that accounts for the highest portion. What was interesting, at least for me, was the cost of windows and doors takes about 20% of the shell and core, which I found to be quite interesting. So this is still windows and still doors that we traditionally use in our construction. So again, it could be useful for you to compare this with your own project, but for us, we just want to show the potential of what we can build out if we're able to amalgamate a number of projects and analyze those particular costs. So I think, what next in terms of closing up or wrapping up? One is just a call to action or an invitation for developers in this space to share with us their cost data. It is useful for us to build out such inputs, such outputs, such knowledge products. And the next one, I'm hoping I can be able to present, 10, 15 projects and compare the cost across different ones. So we would want people to continue sharing that. And as a caveat that I always make whenever I request developers to share with us information, is that we are not seeking to interfere with the competitive landscape. Unless you are like a guru, you might be able to tell which project that was. But we are very cognizant of information sharing and the sensitivities around project data. So we just want to be able to share the outputs in a way that can be able to help market development. And I hope many of you will heed the call of action and share with me whatever information that you can. Thank you very much.